played its part. So we welcome our two independents, Alan and Sarah. Welcome online. Thank you for joining us, and we're sorry that you couldn't be here with us today. We also say hi to Shane, and we say hi to Yvonne as well. And thank you, Jill, for listening in. Okay, without further ado, I am going to take us to our apologies. So at this stage, we've got attending via our link, Councillor Parata, who will join us soon, Alan and Sarah, and then we've got our supporting staff. Everyone else is here. I do have an apology for Councillor Ria.
I'll move.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by myself. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Any declarations of interest? Nothing here today. All good. Let's go to our minutes, page 5. 5 to 9. Everyone had a good read of our minutes. Are you happy that there's a presentation of what was discussed? Moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Foster. Alan, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a correction. I think it's on page 7.
Yes.
Under 9.3, that first bullet point, I think the word hide is meant to be guide. And guide, not hide. Thank you for that. I just wanted to show you I've actually read the minutes.
Here we go, chocolate fish coming your way. If you were here, you would have gotten a chocolate fish, but I'll take it on.
Thank you.
Sorry, did you have a question?
I just had a query about the minutes, and it's to do with our 6 iwi reps.
When they're ready, they'll join us.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Yep. Any other questions or queries? Fair representation of minutes, all in favour? Contrary, carried. Okay, action sheet. Let's take a look. We've got 3 still in progress, so we're on page 10. And 11, there are a couple of 11. So if we take a look at the first one, so this is what Aubrey is involved in, the cultural context. Is that the one 9.1 as well as 9.4? Someone can just give me guidance on that. Do you want to talk to him or two?
Sure. Through you, Your Worship. We'll be working with Councillor Ria in the Motu catchment planning space, where we'll incorporate her feedback, particularly from engagement with mana whenua.
Thank you. Any questions or queries from the floor in regards to our action sheets? If not, we will slide straight into our first report. So our first report is on page 14, and that is prioritisation for flood modelling. Who is going to? Charlotte, are you?
I'm going to introduce Deb and Paula, who are sitting down the end there. So Deb is our contracts advisor, and she's been working on the procurement in this space. So her and Paula are going to tag team talking to you about this report.
Awesome. So the floor is yours. Give us the lowdown, and then I'll open it up for any questions. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you, through your worship. So this decision report is to do with the flood inundation modelling that we're looking at procuring as part of our TRMP review. The intent of this is to replace our current flood overlays, which have been shown to be quite out of date and therefore not entirely accurate. What we're really looking for is some support on the prioritisation of the areas that we've identified as needing flood modelling, and those 2 main options between the high resolution modelling that we'd like and supplementing that with flood maps based on previous events where time or budgetary constraints don't support high resolution modelling.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Paula, you wanted to add anything?
Not at this stage.
Okay, that's all good. So I am going to open this report for questions or queries from the committee. I do have a question, but I'll wait.
No,
I'll go with Sarah first and then Larry.
Thank you. Yeah, I do have a question. When a bridge, or like it's been identified that our two bridges here have a major impact on flooding locally around the Wānaka area and everything like that. So when bridges, and there's a lot of other bridges that actually, you know, when they're banked up with slash and everything, are major contributors to flooding. So how does that rating, or how that, you know, weighting kind of consider those kind of scenarios?
Through you, Your Worship, so I think that would most be affected in on page 16 under infrastructure. So looking at any effects that flooding have on significant infrastructure and also connections to areas. So we have some proposed weightings in there, but obviously open to suggestions if you were wanting for bridges to be identified separately, independent of those sort of broad areas.
Yeah. When I read this, because when we see what's happened in the past, bridges are a major contributor of flooding, and you know, where areas have broken their banks and everything. It's because there's been a dam caused, and it's caused downstream consequences. So I kind of thought that bridges could have been a bit more prioritised.
Just to clarify as well, and just with the caveat, I am not a flood modeller. Before I go into this next part, in terms of when you model the channel, you do also look at, I guess, the impacts of what structures or natural features are in that channel as part of then producing that scale of model and the potential impacts. Just to clarify as well.
Cool. It's identified, thanks.
Thank you. Next I go to Sarah and then I'll go to Rawania.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I wanted to commend the team for the thought you've put into the criteria. In particular, in my days in local government, we were burned with the use of modelling data that wasn't specific enough for the rule framework we were proposing to introduce. This was in Kapiti Coast. We were modelling flood hazard, coastal hazard risk. But having said that, I do have a query about the prioritisation criteria, not so much the weightings, but it may be a little simplistic, and I wanted to query how difficult it would be to introduce a little more rigour, particularly around the different types of communities across Tairāwhiti, more vulnerable communities, particularly socio-economic considerations, and then also the population figures. They're fairly, they're static. They are current state as I understand it, and I wanted to query whether there's the potential for forward projections to be used, particularly because the future development strategy envisages intensification, new areas of development. So those population figures may change in future, and your modelling may need to take that into account. Sorry, that's a lot. Two things: the number of criteria and then how you're looking at populations.
Thanks, through you, Your Worship. I think I'll answer the second question first because it's possibly a little bit simpler. Similar to when you look at climate change considerations, you can look at the populations now, and you could then look at if the populations were X amount. So we could possibly look at how we delineate that and what other options we wanted to look at when we're assigning those weightings, so possibly current state and potential future state. And we have looked at the areas identified in the FDS for growth, and then also looking at current zoning of areas as well that potentially would be growing in population rather than necessarily at the moment identified as growth areas. To your first point, I think it's a really good one, and I agree we have kept it quite simple, and to quote Charlotte, we're not flood modelers, so we don't know everything, and we are hopeful that they would have some input. We do also look to the early engagement that we'd like to do before we go out and finalise these prioritisation areas and before we look at finalising any kind of procurement, and actually engage with the communities and find out what things are important to them, what experiences they've had, and if they would like to see anything else changed in the prioritisation or amended in the weightings to reflect that. So yeah, we do acknowledge that we don't have it perfect at the moment. We're more at a real sort of starting point that we'd like to sort of kick off from.
Are we?
So, given that is a valid point, that probably requires more exploration, that through this next stage that staff are directed to have that conversation or to look at whether we can include the kind of social deprivation, vulnerable communities aspect in that, and the first population base, subset of that.
Okay, I'm going to move to Rawinia and then Alan. Thank you.
What I was gonna say, my question really is, and my perspective always comes down to equity. Is this an equitable weighting system? Because if we talk about weighting it via population, the coastal communities will always miss out. And I just, yeah. I support all the discussions that have already happened, and I think really it needs to be looked at a little bit more deeply, because my concerns are the vulnerability of a community and the impacts of flooding on communities that don't have a lot of people in it. But what does that mean for them? I think it's really about the impact of potential flooding on those particular communities, as opposed to how many people live in them. And I would just like some reflection on whether the weighting criteria, is equitable.
Through you, Your Worship, thank you. I think perhaps, based on these questions and looking at it, the population base being the first thing that you see might not be giving necessarily the right impression, in that there is also a weighting area for recommendations from subject matter experts, including utilising evidence from past flood events. And that would be evidence that we have obviously within us as a council and from our emergency management perspective, but also from when we go out to do that early engagement, because the people living in those communities do actually have the best knowledge about how, where and how, how often, where and who the flooding affects when it happens in those communities. So I think perhaps, as we discussed before, maybe doing some more subsets on those prioritisation areas to really reflect that and make it clear, and then possibly before we went to reach out to our communities, actually flipping those to maybe list them maybe in more of an order of importance, so that they read perhaps in more of the way that we intended them to.
Thank you. Okay, Alan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wish to reiterate the comments that Sarah and Winia made previously. I think the criteria has the potential to create some real equity issues, as was raised. The small groups are always going to lose out, or the ones with not the important infrastructure are always going to miss out. I think having done a number of multi-criteria analysis, the important thing to get here is quite a list of criteria that you're going to use. And at this stage, not assign them specific numbers, but to use a process where you get people in a room and you get them to assign what's particularly important for a particular area and to rank it. That's, I think, the way you're going to find out where are the important areas to do the more detailed flood modelling, and where are the areas where you can just rely on your general flood modelling or flood information that you have. In raising these, I think there's a lot of criteria in there which you need to look at about what's the future land use and its potential to affect flooding? What are the important community assets, hospitals, aged care, schools, all those sorts of things that should be in here for people to say, actually, yeah, the road's important, but actually our marae down here is the most important thing, which is right next door to our school. That's the important thing. I'm just raising this, just thinking a wee bit forward, where when you get into your section 32 analysis, if you haven't got a good base for determining your approach to flood modelling, your section 32 analysis is going to fall apart. So what I'm suggesting you do is have a wee think about what you need to look at in terms of section 32, which is about social, cultural, economic, all of those aspects, and start to think about those matters now to help you frame up the flood modelling, so that when you choose which flood modelling you're doing, you've already started to think about your options and how you're going to address those. So I think it's just a way of expanding it a bit, thinking about where it's going to go and how you're going to use it, and frame it up so it's nicely ready for you to use when you get to section 32 and you're really having to go through the economic, social, all those costs and benefits. So that would be my suggestion to help frame up and understand what's your best flood modelling approach. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you for that feedback. And I can see the team nodding. Thank you for that. Anyone at the table? Colin, thank you.
It's been moved, this at all? Can I move it?
You can move it.
I can move it, and I'd move line 32, which is taking option 2, the high resolution in flood hazard areas close to populations, and to comment on that, we had pointed out this morning that aggregation is one of the keys, and so where it's known that aggregation is happening, there's obviously an area target, option 2, and then option 4 is the use of visual mapping, which is going to give us a lot of knowledge. So yeah,
Are you moving
I'm going to move
number 2 on page 16? So go to the recommendations.
So what do we do with the point 32, which is the recommended option?
What is point 32? Go to the recommendations on page 16.
So it's recommendation 2.
So what you are talking about is on, if you go to page 16 of your agenda, if you provide,
page number coming up.
it should be at the nearly at the beginning of your report. That is where the recommendation. So what I'm hearing from you is that you are moving number 2, which is option 2 and 4 combined.
Thank you.
Awesome. And you're happy to move. So for option 1, and we'll give more opportunity if people want more questions, you will put more work into the criteria that we just spoken about, and then number 2 is moved, and then 3 is the areas that they are recommended. You're moving all our recommendations on page 16, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you for that. Do I have a seconder for the recommendations on page 16? Thank you, Councillor Foster. Before we carry on, I just wanted to make sure everyone that wanted to have input can have input now. Councillor Parata.
Sorry, that's just moved a little bit too fast for me.
We've still got heaps of time.
I don't entirely understand the implications of the recommendation number 2, and I was wondering if staff can just explain that a little bit better so that I can make a more informed decision. I'll be really honest, I've read these papers. They're not easy papers to understand, and so I'm gonna handbrake and slow it down every time I don't fully understand, because I understand the implications and the complexity for what these decisions will mean for our region. So I'd rather move slower and understand everything and ask my questions than speed through it. So if somebody can just explain to me that the number 2.
Thank you for that question, and yes, we want everyone to ask what they want to ask and need to ask. So can someone talk about how we're going to combine option 2 and option 4 and what it means for the decisions we are making? Thank you.
Through your worship, yes. So option 2 is listed on page 23 in a little bit more detail. So option 2 is to obtain the high resolution modelling in areas, and we would use our amended prioritisation and weighting. So we've already obviously said that we will definitely look to hone that in and use a more equitable system and allow everybody to have their voices heard when we are assigning those prioritisations and weighting, with acknowledgement that it will be very difficult to please everybody. And we will also look to some other flood modelling that's happening within council to see if that can be captured within some modelling that's happening already to try and support more areas to get that higher resolution. And then the reason for combining that with option 4 is because, as acknowledged, we cannot afford to, at this moment in time, do high resolution modelling for the whole region. We know that the layers that we currently have are very inaccurate, are very out of date. So we would like to update those layers using more information that we have from more recent flood events, which is imperfect, and also utilising the knowledge of those subject matter experts so that we can have something that's more reliable, although obviously acknowledging that it's not going to be perfect. And even with a perfect model, unfortunately, they don't tell the full story 100% of the time of what's going to happen either. So it's trying to make what's currently very out of date and very inaccurate significantly improved, but obviously working within the constraints that we have.
Can I have 2 supplementary questions, and then I won't have any more?
Good, there's no rush.
When you say subject matter experts, are those scientists? Because the reason I'm asking is that in the region there are some places that have significantly higher cultural value. I'm thinking specifically of Whangāti Pro, because I don't know Tairāwhiti and Whakata the way I probably should, but Whangāti Pro, wharepunga has a really high value to us, as does Waipiro Bay. So I'm just, when you say subject matter expert, is there space there for those subject matter experts to also be cultural experts? Because it's not that the people, there's heaps of people that live in those places. It's the importance of the historical and cultural value to our people.
Through your worship, so through early engagement, we are looking to engage those types of subject matter experts that you've described. 100% in this context, it does not just mean just scientists or just modellers. The people who have lived in those, and who've had their families live in those areas for a number of years have got far better knowledge sometimes than anything that we can get from imagery or from scientists who don't know the area as well as those who live there. And we definitely have looked to obviously identify what we can in terms of areas of cultural significance. But again, looking for that input from those people who are experts in those areas to inform us of what we may have missed and what needs to be in there in general, and anything that needs to be valued higher than perhaps we've realised internally.
Thank you. I'm comfortable with that answer.
Sarah, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add an additional factor as you're considering the criteria. We've covered off socio-economic considerations, we've covered off cultural considerations, tautoko rāwinea, really important point. But what we haven't mentioned, and Aroha Mai, I should have mentioned it earlier, is also the economic considerations. And if you look at areas of the region that are important for employment or commercial activity, I think that should be taken into consideration as you revisit your criteria.
Thank you for that feedback. The team nodding.
100%.
Great. The floor is still open if anyone still have questions in regards to this report. Councillor Foster.
The only question I've got is that I did second something, but it's not clear because we're going to change the weighting. But what I'm seconding, actually.
You've seconded what is in front of you.
Yeah.
The team has taken some feedback in regards to how to fine-tune the weighting and maybe add more criteria or less? When will we be able to see what you, are you waiting for community feedback? This is an ongoing work in progress. This is not a decision we make today. It's iterative, because you will go back for feedback and get more feedback. So we will see this again.
I think through your worship, I think in terms of the criteria and the weightings, I think it would be beneficial if we begin the process of early engagement with the community, you know, being that this has been moved, and then come back to the committee with those amendments that have then had community and subject matter expert input into them, so that you can get a more fulsome picture.
So what I'm saying is that should we exclude number one totally until you come back with alternatives?
Yeah, a CEO.
Yep, so through your worship, as it stands, if you were to adopt the recommendations, you're agreeing basically with what's there without us having to do anything. So my advice to you would be to either amend or not have one at all, but you'd amend number one to being refines prioritisation criteria, weightings, etc., following community engagement, and come back. Or you could just leave it.
We can do refine.
Cross the number one out.
Okay, I'm going to ask the mover.
What?
Do you want to, if we're looking, were you listening, Colin? Number one, what we are talking about, what Larry raised, and I agree, what we are saying, one is a work in progress, number one that you moved on page 16. What is going to happen is that they will get specialist input and community input and fine-tune it. So what we are passing, if we use this wording, is saying we agree with what's on the paper. We are not agreeing fully with what's on the paper. What we are agreeing is, and what Nadine said, there are two options. We can change the wording to agree for the team to refine the criteria, and then when it's finished, it will come back to us. So you're happy with that?
I mean, it's a problem when you've got to have half of one and half of another option. It's not an ideal option.
Colin, we're at number one. If you take a look at the weightings,
Right.
we're not at your option 2 and option 4 now. We're on page 60. Number one talks about the prioritisation. I just want to check with you that you're happy for us to change the word from agree with the prioritisation to either delete number one and not pass it right now and wait for it to come back, or use the wording refine the prioritisation.
No, fine. Yep.
Okay. So what we're going to pass then, is the rest of the committee happy with the wording? If you can just give us a thumbs up, all good. So we will have refine the prioritisation. Then number 2 is option 2 and 4, and number 3 is with the list. Any more questions from our committee? All good? Well, we have a mover in Councillor Alder, seconder in Councillor Foster. Thank you for your great work. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Okay, now we move to our regional policy statement provisions, which is on page 33. Who's going to speak? Paula. It's up to you again, so I'll hand over to you, Paula.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've also got Yvonne online to answer any questions. So basically this paper is to provide a summary of the proposed policy changes to the TRMP through the RPS workstream. Also to give an update on the Tairāwhiti framework from the last meeting. Also guidance on the timing of engagement with area authorities. And the last thing is to also endorse the RPS approach regarding assessment and consideration of significant outstanding values in the region. So open to questions.
Good. Any questions or queries? So this is something that the previous council have seen, because we did work earlier on this, so we have seen it before when I read it. But then again, taking our new key to, I'm not finding my words, kiwata kitai in here. I'm going to open the floor for questions from our councillors and our committee members. Yes, Councillor Foster.
Thank you. Can I just ask how long and what cost does a delay make if we're waiting for a group to engage? So if we're looking at, say, having to drag things out for another 3 months, 6 months, because there's no engagement, because what I'm seeing in this whole TRMP is a lot of delays and waiting for consultation, and I'm just really mindful of the cost and what the delay is going to, what the consequences of the delay is going to be. It doesn't seem to be a bit of urgency when there should be, because this is really important and we want to have it done by 2028. And we've kind of been dragging the chain quite a bit already because of consultation.
CEO, thank you.
So my understanding was from the last meeting, there was quite a significant amount of input that came through from Councillor Ria, and so that required further work. So this is not necessarily an engagement on behalf of others holding us up. This is also us working through the process to make it sure we've got it right internally before we go out for further engagement.
Sure. Okay.
For this particular.
Because in the recommendations we've been asked to whether to do engagement with the Iwi Hapu or to progress with the draft regional policy statement to seek public feedback at the same time as feedback is sought from the Iwi Hapu. So that's why I was asking the question: is it going to take extra time and money and delay if we have to do the first as opposed to the second?
And through your worship, I would say that you would have to also weigh up the cons of going straight to engaging with the wider public without first, giving effect to our partnership principles that the council had agreed to, and any subsequent, this is litigation that could occur as a result of adopting an RPS at a later date.
Fine. So I've got no problem with it as long as now that I've been informed a bit better.
Great.
Thank you.
Next, Alan, and then Sarah, and then Colin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, and I just wanted to pick up on that last comment that was made to the committee, and it's a very tricky line to draw, the consultation, trying to engage with people who perhaps don't have the resources or the whatever it is to be engaged, and how you do that in a way that perhaps you're able to provide a framework to get things started. But then you don't want to have been seen to have sort of predetermined anything, so it's quite a tricky process. And I'm an outsider, and basically I'm going to defer to the rest of the committee. You know your community much better than I do, and I think that's really a matter for you to have the say on and discussion. There were just a couple of matters I wanted to clarify. For option 2, which is on page 44, I was just wanting to clarify with officers there that they haven't sort of set it out specifically, but there is the clause 4A mandatory requirement to provide a draft to mana whenua for them to provide advice on, and for the council to specifically consider that advice and must have particular regard to that advice. Is that what you were alluding to in that option 2 on page 44? It wasn't clear to me.
Yes, I believe that's what it's alluding to.
Yes.
Thank you. That gives me comfort. That's good. The other just question I was wanting to pick up with officers as well through your worship, and it picks up on the comment I made before about draft section 32 reports, and I'm really wondering whether those will be starting to be drafted up along with your issues and options reports. They're quite helpful because they're a good way to provide background information. And I was just wondering and that's on page 37, paragraph 5. And I just wanted to get an understanding from officers as to what sort of information was proposed to be put forward with the policy changes.
Can you just clarify your question?
Just restate your question, please, Alan.
The question I'm asking is, will there be draft Section 32 reports be provided along with issues and options when you go into community engagement? I want to understand what sort of level of detail and information you're looking to provide.
Through you, Your Worship, I'll just clarify our process for the moment.
Thank you.
With the non-statutory seeking public feedback, we are looking to just release the issues and options summary rather than a draft Section 32. We have begun to draft those reports already, but we aren't planning to release them alongside the draft at the feedback stage. But certainly they will be prepared well in advance of coming back to the Council Committee for agreement for notification through that formal proposed plan stage.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, officers. That helps me understand your process there. Thank you.
Thank you. So Colin, and then Rawinia, and then Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I'm on a roll. Can I move option 1? And just to speak to it, you know, we seem to be struggling to have engagement with iwi.
So what are you moving at option 1?
The recommendations are on page 36.
Sorry, I forgot about that.
So maybe
my
talk
page
first,
number.
and then you decide if you want to move it. So first give your comment, and then we...
Well, I'll make a comment.
On there.
Option 1 is suggesting that we leave the thing as it is on the table because we have not got enough engagement with iwi. And this sort of through this whole this document and subsequent ones, there is a bit of a pattern showing up that we seem to be having this problem, engaging our community, in particular hapu. So is it a problem within the council, or is it a problem out there?
I'll ask Mr. Takarua to answer
I'm
that.
just looking around. So yeah, okay, that's my question. Why is it that we're having a problem engaging?
Through you, Madam Chair, a couple of sides, I guess, to that question, and as the Chief Executive alluded to before, there's an element of preparedness that Council needs to undertake in the first instance for the region in general. It's not just solely focused on our iwi hapu landscape, is ensuring that our ducks are in a row, that we know that when we're going out, we know what we're talking about. There's I guess a whakapapa, if you like, from start to beginning of what's on the table for discussion, what the processes look like that Council will be undertaking with all of that, what are the opportunities for feedback loops in and around, I guess, the RPS in this context. And so that's, as the Chief Executive alluded to before, an internal component. As far as outwardly, I think we do, humbly, I do say this, I think we do really well at the marae hapu level out in the region. I think at times the priorities of iwi entities and the iwi leadership relationships are placed elsewhere. I think we will continue as part of our commitment and our requirement against current suite of legislation to facilitate a space where we are attempting to meet our statutory obligations. Certainly meet them at a bare minimum. We'd love to go above and beyond, but that takes a partnership. Now, again, I can't speak for what iwi entities, post-settlement group entities want to prioritise and how their leadership wants to prioritise those types of things, but at a marae hapu level, I think we have a great opportunity, and there's some really good relationships and opportunity for an engagement out across the region, and it is it can be a nuanced space, but then again, Council understanding the entirety of our, I guess, treaty commitments across the spectrum of tangata whenua relationship, from post-settlement group entity as iwi, from whānau hapu marae, from Māori landowners and land trust, marae trust, And council does have a role and a responsibility and a requirement across all those relationships. It's just, again, preparing ourselves so that we're best placed to have that conversation in a meaningful way. And as Alan had mentioned before, the capacity capability challenges are real out there. Every time Wellington has a great idea and then we get given a job, Wellington may not have factored in actually the requirement that's actually placed on those in our region. And in this context, whānau hapu and marae aren't sitting there waiting for the next brilliant idea to come out of central or local government. They've all got day jobs, and yet we're demanding constantly. We talked about a flood requirement, you know, in the paper just before this. We're talking about this, and the next 5 papers we'll have, we need to talk to whānau hapu iwi as well. And so it is incumbent on us to ensure that not only within this TRMP stream, right across the business, that we're engaging in a way where we connect it up to maximise everybody's time, capability and capacity.
Māori hupu, how do I pronounce that?
Hapu. Hapu.
H-U-P-U. No, I'm talking about Māori hupu, which is quoted in the next article, and that it is translated, I believe, as obedience. So we've got consultants on the job here that are helping us engage. The consultants are saying we need to upskill staff, they're saying we need to do more engagement, and we should do it differently. These organisations are out there. Shouldn't we just drop them a note and get them to contact us on their terms? Are we pushing our terms on our iwi? And are we calling for Māori hupu and ending up with hupu hupu?
What is hupu, Colin? No one knows the word hupu.
Through you, Madam Chair, and yeah, I'm a little bit lost in terms of
no one knows that word
as well. Councillor Wharehinga, I can see him quickly looking up in the dictionary.
He says in our papers.
But sorry to digress, but to answer your question directly, Councillor, no, we're not saying, please, iwi entities, iwi organisations, you have to do what we ask you. We've, I think, attempted in many ways, shapes and fashions at that level of the relationship to create a space that meets the intent of our partnership approach, right?
Kupu, sorry.
Which means word.
Still learning.
The word means word.
Yeah, short answer to your question, Councillor, is no. We have been, I guess, very open to how tangata whenua would like to engage, and we haven't sort of tried to put any barriers or council process ahead of the intent of our partnership approach.
Rawinia and then Sarah.
Sorry, what did we decide that word was?
Kupu.
Kupu. It was kupu word.
Kupu word.
Kupu.
Kupu
Word.
Yeah. Okay. Kupu. Because I was confused.
We have a few kupu to share with us.
I'd never heard that word you said before. Not in Te Reo Māori, not in English, ever. But I just want to reiterate what Gina's saying is that in Te Tairāwhiti and really in all regions, those that do for their iwi, for their hapu, for their marae, for their whānau, they're doing it, all of it. And most of it is unpaid. They're not just there waiting to give us feedback on, you know, whatever policy that we're putting up. And so this is kind of the pathway to partnership. It's a negotiation and it's not always going to go smoothly. And as we develop, and I say we, and I mean tangata whenua, I stand there in my tangata whenua capacity right now, and I say as we develop in that, as we get better at what we're doing, as we learn to navigate systems that we have not typically been invited to participate in, as we get better at doing that, the relationship will get stronger and things will happen more efficiently, right? But we're not there yet as a region, and we're way ahead of other regions. And so I ask that we be mindful of that, of the expectations that are put upon hapu and iwi to consult and to lead and to participate in absolutely everything, because even as a council, we're split across various committees so that we can maximize ourselves. We don't sit across everything, but iwi are expected to sit across everything. So I just want us to be really mindful of that, and also mindful of the capacity, and also mindful that these are not typically spaces that Māori have been invited to. And so we're still developing as we go. Council has a really long history, and post-settlement entities have a much shorter lifespan. So, tēnā. The question I really had was around kind of Alan's option 2. Well, he raised option 2 first. Do we have the relationship with iwi to have that conversation? And are we being honest and genuine about being able to receive their feedback and make make changes as required? Because I wouldn't mind going out for public consultation / engagement if we can have those conversations with iwi on the side and be genuine about being ready to receive their feedback.
Thank you.
You know what I mean?
Yes, so I'm going to ask Jean to respond, Rawinia.
And I'll just preface that by supporting your statement, Councillor Parata, in the sense that New Zealand Constitution Act, I think 1852, 172 years there's been forms of central local government in this country, and just to reiterate, our settlement landscape's only 12 years old. And that part of our responsibility as a treaty partner as Gisborne District Council is acknowledging and understanding that nuance as part of our reality and our relationship. Now, to answer your question directly, Councillor Parata, yes, absolutely. We've had many iterations of reaching out in a way where we've been asked, or where we've asked iwi entities, iwi representatives, and I'd use this sort of metaphor as, here's the table, where would you like it, how is it set, what's on the menu, you tell us and we'll certainly try and accommodate. And again, I think that in the instances where we have had engagement, I reflect on the iwi technical trial. I think that the TRMP team and the streams where the iwi technicians contributed to, we were absolutely taking on board in terms of what iwi wanted to prioritise and how they wanted to do. I think really it comes down to our ability to sustain continuity of relationship. And so really I just want to reassure that the team is keen to work in a way where we acknowledge our partnership commitments up front, and absolutely we are open to listening, combining, co-designing, co-drafting where that capacity and capability and I guess priority exists. So yeah, we're on board.
Then my thoughts really are then that I would be in favour of that option 2, to move, progress, take steps forward, bring our partners alongside us. And the other thing I would just caution council about is that we're a bilingual nation. Kia tūpato tātou about bringing in words that you don't understand, and the meanings you don't understand. I'm totally happy to help check words, meanings, thoughts, and help you pronounce them, but please don't bring them out to the council table like that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Sarah.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Parata effectively said all and far more that I was going to say, but I was interested in whether iwi and Māori groups, hapu in particular, had the opportunity to comment on these options. It's a transactional interaction that's proposed in this particular paper, and the fundamental relationship is what's going to carry council through, but I know I'm preaching to the choir in that regard. Also interested in whether any legal input had been obtained just in respect of te tiriti obligations, which extend not just to iwi and PSGEs, but to unsettled iwi and hapu. And finally, what staff's recommendation was, notwithstanding I totally support the whakaaro and the kōrero so far, but we were provided some options with little riding advice from staff. That's my query.
Your Worship, I'll defer that to Yvonne.
Thank you, Yvonne.
We were seeking direction from the committee. We're interested in the advice. So we've, in discussions around the council staff arena, there's been many different views, and you've certainly heard them at this meeting as well. So it would be helpful to get some clear direction from the council committee for a way forward, and we can rely on that for the future. We didn't seek legal advice on this. Council has its treaty compass and other practices that we are working very hard, to follow. So yeah, we're seeking direction.
Councillor Wharehinga and then Councillor Foster. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just, in regards to recommendation 1 around providing direction on whether to extend timeframes for engagement with iwi and hapu, I'm actually more in favour of option 1 to purposefully create the space to engage with tangata whenua with hapu prior to going out to community. In my history of being here at the council, one of the biggest criticisms has been that going out, doing both at the same time, actually, in the eyes of our iwi partners, relegates them down to a status that's less than partnership. We keep referring to our iwi stakeholders as partners, our iwi partners, often. So yeah, I would actually like to see us provide some space within the region in order to be able, like what the intention of what Councillor Alder was wanting to do. I absolutely agree with that sentiment. Maybe not some of the words that were used during that time, but
or not words.
Yeah, or not words. The sentiment around option 1, that's where I'm leaning towards in regards to recommendation 1. Yeah, again, just leaning back on my experience of how, when we've engaged in a certain way, it's kind of it's been interpreted in a certain way with our iwi partners. So I would like to see us grant some time in order for us to engage specifically with iwi and hapu. The part that I found that was the gap was the recommendation from staff about what that could possibly look like in terms of timeline extension. When we kind of, for me, if I'm saying yes to extending time frame, like Councillor Foster has brought up, it's taken a long time to get here. I don't want us to rush, because this is going to be the TRMP is the thing that's going to set us up for the next, 20, 30, however many years. We don't want to rush the beginning of that just to get the plan done. So I want us to, I guess, move that pace, but considerably. So what does extended timeframes actually look like?
So I guess that depends on how we manage to progress, and I guess when we manage to have those meaningful conversations, it depends on the feedback we get back and then what we may need to. So I guess that's why we didn't necessarily say it'll be 3 months extra or it'll be 6 months extra, because it does depend, I guess, on the conversations and when they start, and I guess the types of things that we do as well. In terms of the current time frame that we were working to, in terms of notifying the RPS, it was June next year is the current one we were working to. So, and as you know, next year is also an election year as well. So I guess if we move past that June date, we're looking into the new term with another council because of that kind of, that sort of timing.
In a June decision-making stop here. Nadine.
Well, I think what it is if we, with and there's a bit of a look at how the program is shaping out, that if we, recognising that there is an election next year, and ideally you wouldn't want to be hitting any of that time with a new council, and we do have a need to actually progress this work. What we need to do is just, going back to what Jean was saying, make sure we're lined up internally. Shouldn't really have to push out too much of the time frame at the other end if we can just get this, frame up this engagement piece right.
So if we're, supplementary, Your Worship, so if what we're saying is that RPS date will still stay at June, we can extend the olive branch in regards to iwi engagement. I'm trying to looking over here and over here because I see eyes looking this way as well, and still meet that June 2025, because I do agree with that in terms of timing. We want to try to put that out this side in order for the next iteration of council to be able to pick that up and keep going.
That is still ideally what we would like to achieve, even still under that option 1, which is why we didn't give a specific potential delay.
Any more questions or queries? I support that we make sure. Oh, I did ignore you. You did ask, but I'm just going to.
I was just like support Brian's call to extend the time frame, and now that I've had clarity on what that looks like, I'm even more certain that that's the way we should go. So I'm happy to support that, and I'll move it actually.
Thank you. So you are moving option 1.
Option 1, the first part of option 1, not the second part, or where it says or to progress the draft regional policy statement to seek public feedback.
Go to page 36. Are you on page 36?
Yeah. So that means the first part of it.
It's a two-part thing. We can't recommendation. We
First
can't
comma.
recommend as it is. It's got to be either one or the other.
That's what I'm saying. Until the first comma.
I'm supporting Councillor Whainga. And I'm happy to move it.
Moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Whainga. So what we are discussing or moving is that we will create more space for iwi hapu engagement and then progress, not progress at this stage alongside community input. We will first create that space and see how it goes, and then take it from there. Is everyone agreeing with that? All in favour?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Thank you, thank you. Let's go to... I'm not going to break for any coffee or anything, so please help yourselves as we go. We are at the Te Mana o Te Wai review on page 53. I'm just going to help myself a little coffee. Who is going to speak?
I'm going to introduce Ariel, who is sitting down there.
Hi, Ariel.
And I believe Yannick and Jane are going to tag team with Ariel.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. So this report seeks this committee's endorsement for council staff to further investigate the proposed recommendations that came through following the review of the regional freshwater plan and the Waipawa catchment plan, which assesses both freshwater plans against the Te Mana o Te Wai in its current form in the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management 2020. I should also note that the regional freshwater plan and the Waipawa catchment plan were developed under the previous iteration of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. I'm just going to call it a PSFM now. And the recommendations that the contractor had provided can be largely grouped into 3 categories. So the first category of recommendations are on plan policy drafting for the new regional freshwater plan and the new 7 catchment plans for our region. And the recommendations will include aligning the policies and rules with the hierarchy of obligations and ensuring that we uphold the 6 principles that guide the roles of Tangata Whenua and other New Zealanders as outlined in the NPSFM 2020. The second category of recommendations involve upskilling council and staff So the recommendations include providing training for all council staff and elected representatives on Te Mana Te Wai training, and as well as providing all council staff and elected representatives a better understanding of the cultural context of our region. And the third category of recommendations involves working with iwi and hapu in our region, which includes reviewing the formal relationships with our iwi and hapu, which also involves resourcing iwi and hapu to build their capacity and capability in meeting their role as kaitiaki.
Thank you, Ariel. That was very good. Nice summary of what is in this paper. I'm going to open the floor. Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And thank you very much for that, for your attached to this paper. I'm happy with the recommendation, and I'm also happy to move it. What occurred in the previous paper is the practical example of why these three things here are important. You know, yes, we need to make sure that our plan, policy drafting, and all of those kind of core things that councils are in charge of are done in alignment with our commitment to the principles of Te Mana o Te Wai, but also that incremental other stuff around upskilling council workshop culture, and I would also extend it to be upskilling councillors themselves in regards to things like what's going on here, understanding the use of Māori kupu and concepts, you know, in a consistent manner in order for us to know as a collective group of councillors and as a council organisation what the words we're using and also what concepts apply. Because as Councillor Parata did mention in the paper previously, we have to be very careful around those things. She used the word kia tūpoto, the phrase kia tūpoto. We do have to be very careful because depending on who else is in the room, I know that if we say the wrong things, and even if I say the wrong things, my aunties will take my head off, you know. And you know, we're colleagues, we're friends, we can kind of have an open conversation in regards to these kinds of things. But that's not necessarily how our community may, well, we know that, we're councillors, we know that our community talks to us in a certain way sometimes, and those could be those trigger points that where that happens, you know. So things like us understanding the uses of of the phrases that we're using and of these concepts. And also progresses into the third point around working with iwi and hapu. So I'm happy with where we've landed in regards to this. What I'm more interested, I'm happy with this in this space and time. What I'm more interested in seeing is, okay, what does this do in regards to the next implementation of policy and planning as the drafts come out? That's the really key thing. Why I want to, the other point I want to make as well, for the context of the table and context of those who may not have been around the council table, is that this also ties in with previous recommendations that we've made as a council and commitments that we've made as a council to the principles of Te Mana o Te Wai in regards to guiding our NPS FM, so National Policy Statement on Terrestrial Management. That's me, Your Worship. I'm happy to move.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions? Councillor Alder.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to talk against the proposal. I think at the time we've had a change of government, and this government has actually given us till 1st December 27 to come up with this final plan. And the reason they've given us that space is because they intend to make changes. We've heard that loud and clear. What those changes are going to be, we can only guess at. And we can go down lots of paths believing we're heading in the right direction to get the whole lot overruled. I notice we are employing consultants in this, and a lot of the consultants' recommendations are to employ more consultants so that we upskill and do certain things and head in certain directions. Well, to me, this is a waste of money at a time when we're dealing with uncertainty. I'm not going to use that word kupu again.
Please don't. Just stick to English. Just stick to English. think it's the best.
I thought we were being encouraged to learn.
Yeah, when we learn it outside of a council meeting.
So where was I? can't use that word. So my recommendation is that we don't adopt this. We keep a finger on the pulse of what this government is up to. We keep our iwi and hapu fully up to date with what central government is planning, and we take a wait and see approach. That's me. Thank you.
Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, well, actually, Colin's basically said what I was going to say. You know, this date's been pushed out to 2027, and I don't want staff spending more time than they need to be spending on something that can be actually changed because we've been told it's being reviewed. So I'm in favour of, look, we should not be carrying on pushing this to be completed this year, 2024. We've got another 3 years, and there will be changes. We don't know what they are. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge yet, but I don't want staff having to do more work. Like everyone wants this to happen, but we do want to get it right. So that's where I'm sitting.
Councillor Foster.
Yep, I've had concerns as well. You know, the hierarchy has already been changed by this government, and I think, you know, we don't need to be rushing. We can. We've got till 2027 now, and like as I said, there's going to be some changes. We've got a lot of stuff that goes around Marapuai with for oil-free waters and our ability to use water in the right way for the region, economically, for the people and for business. So there's a lot of big questions out there. There's a lot of concerns from all parts of the community. So I'm in favour of holding it until 2027. We may continue going down the path that we have originally intended. That might be, but if there are some questions in the meantime that need to be answered and some changes that are happening, we need to be listening.
Councillor Parata, I might just ask a question while you get ready, just for my own clarification, is I'm confused by the comments made, let's wait till 2027. That's not how plans work. I'm just trying to, and this is why I'm saying this, I'm just trying to clarify it in my own brain. Plans don't work, we wait till 2027 and then we whip something out of a hat. It is iterative work, so am I understanding it correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
no, I just for myself.
So through your worship, the Waipawa plan took 7 years before it was actually operative. So, so it does take a long time, and I was not quite clear as to what reference you were making.
I just want everyone to be clear, because everyone mentioned let's wait till 2027. I want you to clarify to me what you mean with that.
No, I didn't mean wait. The government has given us a renewed deadline, and in the next 6 months we can expect change. And all I'm suggesting is that we wait until the change happens, and then we head off on a path.
Okay, Rawinia and then Alan.
Trying to think of how to get my point across. Te mana o te wai was wanted by iwi. Not supporting it now will mean that there will be backlash and it will affect the partnership that we are trying to build as a region, united region going forward. But that's not the reason we should support it, because iwi wants it. That's not the reason. The reason I support it is some of this mahi just makes sense. Some of it just makes sense. And some of it is just morally, you know, it's up here in your brain. Like, you should just do it because the water is the most important thing. We're in this position, this climate change position, because all around the world, globally, we have not looked after our natural resources. Te mana o te wai is about looking after fresh water. And if the government wants to change directions, we'll pivot at that point. But as a region, they have worked hard. I haven't been part of the policy development for Te Mana o Te Wai, But I know there's lots of mahi that has happened in and around this space for the region. Well, the region who's facing climate change at an alarming rate, does that not just make sense? So I'm not in support of just letting it lie and waiting to see what this government will do, because this is for the region and this is regional leadership. And our iwi partners have said this is what we want. And we, as council, want the best for our region. If in 6 months the coalition government wants us to shift slightly, we can do that. But it'll never change the fact that we need to be looking after our natural resources and freshwater management better. That's what Te Mana o Te Wai is about. So whatever Josh moves, I second that.
Councillor Parata.
Thank you for that. Before I go to you, Alan, I just wanted to make a quick comment, because Alan, you and Sarah would not have heard this before, but in the beginning of the year, we did sit down with, or I sat down with our iwi chairs and iwi CEOs, and we had a general discussion around Māori wards in regards to Te Mana o Te Wai, and also some fast-track provisions for housing. And in principle, at that meeting, I agreed that I'll take it to councillors, and I did send out an email, and we did then come back with formal. Nadine is just trying to.
I'm not going to. But we
came back with formal resolutions. We did support that. So I just wanted to remind councillors as well. I'll come back to you. You don't have to put up your hand. I'll come back to everyone. I'll open it up. I just wanted for Sarah and Alan to have that knowledge as well, that we did have these discussions earlier, and as a council, there was support for those 3 provisions. So Alan, I'm going to pass over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the first meeting I came to, I've said I've been around in this game for a long time. If we waited till every bit of legislation or national policy statement was in place and ready, and we knew it was not going to change before we did something, we would never do anything. In particular, for Tairāwhiti, just reiterating the comments Rawhinia made, the issues of water over allocation are not going to go away, regardless of what the national policy statement on freshwater says. The importance of freshwater for people's health, for ecosystem health, is not going to go away because the government changes the bit of legislation. The legislation might be tinkered around a bit, but my gut feel is those fundamental issues around freshwater and other natural resources will continue to be there. So I would be suggesting that council should progress. If there's one thing that's not as important as freshwater, it's clean, it's fresh air. Freshwater is pretty fundamental, and I consider that you should keep going forward. You can pivot off changes in legislation and regional and national policy statements and so on as you go along. But the fundamental work you have to do to understand people's values and all those other things still has to be done and is there as a resource for you to use regardless of what the legislation does. So I would be suggesting that we do continue, noting, of course, that things might change on us as they always do. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Any more questions, queries? Councillor Telfer, you had your hand up. Thank you.
No, look, I was just on page 53, just on the purpose of the report there, where it said the purpose of the report is to seek this committee's endorsement for council staff to further investigate the proposed recommendations provided in the final Te Mana o Te Wai review report and present options for implementation for approval at the 4th of December meeting this year, which is 2024. The final freshwater management plan is not actually, doesn't have to be done until 2024. So I just want clarification of what the implications would be if this comes to council on the 4th of December 2024 this year, and is asking for approval there, what the implications are then going forward for the freshwater. That's where I just want a bit more clarification.
Jean, thank you. I think what we need to also do is just clarify for our new councillors the whole process of the plan and how it works and what these principles mean, and tie that together just for a better understanding as well. Jean.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think, and great question, Councillor, and I think before the rest of your committee members ponder on their response and answers, if you're to look at, I guess, the actual recommendations, probably only about maybe 40% of them in their entirety relate specifically to something to do with Te Mana o Te Wai. The remainder is really what council should be doing as part of their BAU anyway, in and around lifting our capability, in and around ensuring we have the appropriate relationship agreements and the likes. And so I think certainly the wet or the topic that's been laid down, I just would probably draw our attention to the actual detail in the recommendations and what they say. And as far as Te Mana o Te Wai goes as a policy, and I can understand the reservation, but the bulk of them actually relate to what we should be doing as a council anyway, as far as our treaty partnership responsibilities. They don't, all of them, and so when I think about this notion of what spend is required and the time that's going to be wasted, we could be potentially saying investing in ourselves and in our capability as a treaty partner is a waste of time. That could be a way that that's interpreted, given that only a certain amount of the recommendations relate specifically to the position on Te Mana o Te Wai.
Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you, Worship. I was just going to say, we're the council that went out and provided enforcement orders into forestry long before central government did Milu. Aren't we the council that had said to central government over and over again that their forestry planting national policy statement was inadequate, and sent them the message that the things that they were doing down there were inadequate for us? Aren't we the region that always stands up for ourselves and provides our own direction? Then why the heck are we talking about, oh, let's see what central government are going to do? We're Tairāwhiti, man. We create our own rules for ourselves. Yes, we do need to come underneath a national policy statement. We do need to fight to make sure that those things have room for us. Te Mana o Te Wai is the fight to create room for us in order to be able to do those things we want to do in region. I can't believe that I'm hearing conversation around this table about this deference to central government. Our community elects us to make community, region-based decisions, not to endorse what's coming out of Wellington. I am deeply disappointed with that being the angle around the table. That makes me even more so. I wish I could vote for this, move it, and vote for it even more, because I want us to do this, and it firms up my support for it in the future every single time this comes to our table now. Deeply disappointed.
Another point I wanted to make is that we are one of 17 regional councils across New Zealand. Every single council work within this framework and do their planning within this framework because it is the law. So I just wanted to clarify as well, I do understand that some changes might happen and then we pivot, just like we pivoted when they changed the RMA, just like we pivoted when they changed Three Waters. At the end of the day, we do our thing, we follow the rules, but also we are also good partners and we have integrity. And so for me, I just wanted to also say this, we are working within the framework that are nationally expected of us to work under. It is not something that we are going above and beyond. It is something which is expected of regional councils across New Zealand. So I also just wanted to put that out there. That is the work currently happening, and I acknowledge that things might change. We do not know how it will change or what might change, but when it changes, we pivot. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. Colin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm almost been turned out to be the bad boy here. I'd like to say I've been an organic farmer for 25 years and my flats are currently in lupins to improve the soil that was damaged by the flood. I'm not suggesting we stop the mana o te wai. All I've suggested is we just take the pedal off a little bit, take the gas off a bit, and see how it plays out over the next few months. That's all I was saying. I'm not denying its existence or its future. I'm just saying let's not throw good money at something that might be different tomorrow. Thank you.
You can say exactly the same about the RMA and the Three Waters work then. Anywho, Larry.
I'll support the recommendation. Order is the most important thing in the quality and the or lack of abundance. There is a change that can work within our realm. We will do it accordingly if that does happen, if there's other recommendation. I agree that I'll go for that recommendation. And I'll impose the staff to further investigate.
Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to share on acknowledging the elephant in the room. I'm a Wellingtonian, but Greater Wellington Regional Council are even implementing the NPS freshwater as it currently stands with a focus on te mana o te wai, and have considered whether to progress the changes to their natural resources plan, decided to do so, and now have a year-long hearing process coming up that they've committed significant resource to. So you're right, Your Worship, councils around the Motu are grappling with the changing sands of our regulatory system, and you work with what you've got at the time. I don't see what's proposed as at all problematic, regardless what happens in the regulatory framework. Upskilling the council work culture and working with iwi and hapu is just going to further build a strong foundation for whatever work needs to come. So I'd wholeheartedly endorse the recommendation.
Thank you. Anyone else wanted, especially questions of clarification, because I do recognise that it is complex processes where we are all in different levels, how long we've been involved or our different involvement. So I do want to make sure that everyone have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification or anything else before I put the recommendation. If not, I am going to put the recommendation, which is on page 54, and the recommendation is very straightforward. I have a mover in Councillor Wharehinga, I have a seconder in Councillor Parata. All in favour?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Okay. We are moving to our TRMP progress update.
Your Worship?
I missed the paper, huh? Is that what someone is trying to say to me?
No.
Sarah, did you want to speak?
Your Worship, yes, thank you. Sorry, this may be an error on my part, but I think we may have missed a recommendation from an earlier paper on page 36.
Me there, page 36, let's take a look. So we said number 1, we are going to
option 1
there, and then provides endorsement for including the significance criteria and the addition of consideration policies. So we didn't discuss that
no.
with you. Did you wanted to discuss that? Because I assumed we passed both.
We did
Yeah.
win them last
So
time.
both were passed, number 1 and 2, but I'm more than happy for you to give feedback there.
No, great. Aroha mai, that's my error. I didn't realise you'd covered off both, but very happy with that. I think to avoid relying on outdated provisions, but also to give plan users certainty and consent applications due consideration. But aroha mai, over to you.
Thank you. That is good. Okay, councillors, then I am going to take us to page 99. And Charlotte, are you going to take us through the TRMP progress updates?
I was just going to take the report as read and note that if people have particular questions about the work streams, we do have Yannick, Drew and Paula here in the room, and also Desiree, of course, if there's any program questions.
So I thought what I might do is open up the 4 categories that we have, and then people can ask their questions. The first is the RPS, and then it's the freshwater stuff, then it's urban growth, and then the forestry stuff. Give people opportunity if they had specific questions. I was just very impressed with where things are going and all the different streams happening. So I'm more than happy to open that now for any committee member who you might have no questions because it was such a good report, but you might have some questions. Floor is open.
We're asking about the whole thing.
You can.
Sorry, if I could just make one, Your Worship, just a note on page 101. There's a paragraph further down in the summary that refers to a separate report around forestry harvest plan change release that's not on your agenda. There'll be one coming at a later date.
Larry.
I've got a question on page 116, number 82, the CBD framework aim to activate our central business district while promoting walking and cycling, public realm improvements, inner city living, repurposing heritage buildings, creating multi-use public spaces for events and placemaking, and developing a hospitality precinct.
Larry, you will be, Larry feels like clapping.
I do. It's the first time I've seen.
Well, Nadine can update us on their visit to Hastings.
Yeah, right.
Nadine, you talk to us about the work, the CBD work. It's just all about the CBD development.
Yes, so just to provide, as part of the refreshing of the TRMP and, you know, having an enabling rules to have a CBD that thrives. So that has been on the agenda for a while, and now we're just kind of anchoring it down into what the next steps will look like. So we did visited Hastings with Trust Tairāwhiti. I might have mentioned last time that we did, and Dongo Whakata, Chief Executive. And, so we were hosted by the Mayor of Hastings and the Chief Executive and his staff, but we also engaged with the Economic Development Agency and talked about the steps that they undertook to revitalise their CBD. So it was like a 10-year program of work, and very much the plan framework to enable it, to enable the type of growth, the type of activities that you wanted to see in the CBD happen. So recognising that CBDs have changed, that they're not so much the place where you go shopping, it's more around cafes and gatherings. Yeah. So we, so this is regulatory side of things to, you know, make sure our rules are fit for purpose, and then there is the further planning that we're doing in partnership with Trust Tairāwhiti.
With that, did they have a lot of accommodation providers in their central city, transforming buildings into?
So they just opened the Quest. The Quest is a new building. So they would do a lot of deals in Hawke's Bay, in Hastings. They have the benefit of having quite a large land holding, so they're able to provide the land. They also do things like fit out shipping containers, and then businesses lease that to provide coffees and open space areas. So yeah, so they do quite a lot of commercial deals.
Yeah. Oh.
Larry will be on that subcommittee. I will expect you there, Larry. Any other questions in regards, especially Alan and Sarah, you will know that there's a lot of work happening in our forestry space as well, and the CEO just led a very successful transition meeting yesterday as well. So that's a space where we're trying to involve everyone. We had the minister here last week as well, because that is a big piece of work to make sure we strike a good balance between economic activity and looking after what we have. So that space is an active working space as well. Let's think what else we can lean into. Well, if we've got no questions, it's great just to have an update. Colin?
Your page 106, point 16, and the partnership team are establishing a new strategy for engaging tangata whenua. Could we have a sort of a brief summary about how the new strategy is different from the old strategy?
Mr. Takarua.
Through you, Madam Chair. So you'll be aware we launched officially Te Tiriti Campus Framework at our council meeting Arepaha on August the 8th. To ensure that there's consistency in that application, we've also had to ensure that there's connectivity with our Te Matapihi engagement processes, which is housed on our internal intranet, along with some other, I guess, information and resources around our treaty partnership landscape. But really it was just ensuring that there's consistency. The last thing that we want to do in terms of building the capability of the organisation was have 10 different expressions or ways of doing and being, and really that was just about ensuring that there's consistency with the Te Tiriti Campus Framework, and then that's reflected in our engagement processes through our Te Matapihi platform.
Any other questions? Thank you for a good update on what's happening. It looks like everyone is quite happy with where we are going. Alan?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, the report was good. The one matter I'd be interested in, it sort of just picking up sort of this different matters relating to engagement and consultation. And I see in the report that the sort of engagement program is being developed. I would be interested in the committee, and this is only my second meeting, so I'm not sure whether this has been in front of you before, but getting a better understanding of what the council's program for engagement and consultation on the RPS and the plan as a whole, what that actually looks like, because there's quite a few threads around, you've got the future urban development strategy and various things happening, and I'm not really getting a feel for where this is heading over the next year or so. So I'd be interested to see that come forward. Maybe it's probably just for me. Most of you might already know what's going on, but I'd be interested in that. The other area question I just had, and I've only had a chance to have a quick read of the future urban development strategy, and it's on page 142, paragraph 12, and it's in relation to development within the central city of Gisborne. And I hadn't seen anything there which was really about sort of brownfield development or turning business or industrial land into residential, and whether that was something that had come through the future urban development strategy. And maybe that's just because I haven't had enough chance to read properly. It was quite a quick skim of that document, so I'd be interested to know about that. So just two matters there. Thank you, Your Worship.
I can speak to, I guess, perhaps in the next update report in December, we'll do a particular focus around that overview of the engagement. And we are, as we've kind of mentioned in some of the other reports, we've got some key things going on and some little tweaks as we're sort of mid-flight in the program as well. And in terms of the brownfield, I'll pass over to Drew, but I guess the short answer is yes. And in terms of if you want to have a talk more about the detail offline, happy to do that as well, but I'll pass over to Drew.
Thanks, through the chair. Yes, just to let you know that the next paper is an update on spatial layers that goes into some detail about what the FDS proposed. So I guess we'll be covering that in the next information paper. The other aspect of the question, sorry.
No, I think that, is that okay with you, Alan? Sorry, I can't see you very well from where I'm a bit blind.
Nadine's big drink problem.
No, that's fine. If it's not in the paper, then I obviously haven't missed it, but I'd be interested to see the next iteration of that coming forward. Thank you.
Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to, when I went to a meeting the other night at the Tairāwhiti Club Rooms, which was a community meeting on the 3B overlay, which Kerry ran, I'd just like to commend them because I think there was quite a few people heading there for a fight. A little bit of, normally a lack of information is a disaster for, you know, allowing people to come at you, but I think the way Kerry did it the other night and the way that it was explained in the slides and going through, there was next to no questions come from the floor apart from one person, which we normally expect to have a go anyway. So I just want to congratulate the team on how that was run, and I think that's a classic example of what we need as far as consultation goes with the community. So well done. Thanks.
Can I also mention, thank you through your worship, that Kerry is leading the transition.
Yeah.
So Kerry is the
Well done, real well done.
Awesome. Okay, team.
Thank you. Again, on the 3B overlay, and I see it's going to be completed in 2026. And my question is there any provision for trees that are already very mature at this point in time to allow them to be harvested? Are they being accommodated?
Yes, through you. Yes, very much so. We're looking at a series of options there. There'll be some land, and we've seen some in detail recently that physically can't be harvested. There's trees lying all over slopes that are dangerous to keep and we're looking at how we may transition that through to a far more sustainable long-term vegetation cover. But where land can be harvested, we're certainly keen for that to occur. It's just that the next step may well be on quite a lot of land that we don't want to actually continue to clear field harvested into the future. So yeah, harvesting's fine if it can be safely done, but there is quite a bit of land out there, particularly close to waterways, where harvesting is in the future.
Any other question I had, just in regards to the work we do, because this comes across my office quite often. I'm great about the overarching work we're doing, the freshwater planning. One thing I want to ask a few questions is our urban design stuff that we are doing. Is it a high priority for us, or work that have to be done? This notable tree, Project 1 and Project 2. I don't understand that. I don't know where it fits in. Is that our street trees? Is that other stuff?
Through the chair, just on the design guide, it's been identified via our consents team as a kind of a missing part of our current plan for consenting decisions. Some time ago we adopted aspects of the Hastings design guide to, I guess, increase the quality of the applications that were sort of the council was receiving. It's part and parcel, priority, I'm not sure, it's part and parcel of the FDS implementation to, I guess, get the best outcomes. Today, our consents team met with a number of other colleagues, and I think from consents point of view, it couldn't come soon enough. And it will The intention is to form part of our existing suite. We've got a commercial design guide, but really the current plan is silent on, I think, some of the valid concerns that were raised during the development of the FDS around how we sort of achieve that sweet spot of intensification without maybe sort of reducing the quality of those proposals. It's not, just to clarify, it's not to provide the rules, the sort of plan rules content. It's really to sort of highlight national, international best practice to achieve better outcomes for consents.
So I hear what you're saying, and I 100% support that, and it makes perfect sense. I have, to me, it is just, is that a priority for us wanting to say develop, making sure we've got the right rules for developing accommodation in the CBD? I don't know. This is why I'm asking. Is that a priority for us, or is there maybe something, or can it wait until, because I just want to be, hand on heart, be able to say to our community, what we are doing is laser focused on the basics. So even our reviews of our plans and stuff that we are doing, I need to be able to say to our community, every cent we are spending is on stuff which make a real difference to what we do, and it is necessary. So I'm not poo-pooing this at all. Like I say, I don't know. I just want us to be clear that what we are putting up as priorities, like, would that sit right next door to doing our plan for the CBD? If you had to put those two next to each other, or do they complement each other? I don't know.
They do, and I know it might look like it's sort of first off the rank or sort of screaming priority, but it's more to allow us to utilise that for consent, and then form part of all of the related plan changes going into next year. Like I mentioned, the commercial design guide. So it's adopted for consenting, and then it's proposed as part of the wider urban plan change.
Your Worship, would you like some more information?
Well, I think so. I just want us, there's so much scrutiny on myself, on council, to make sure, especially for the next 3 years as we do our recovery, that whatever we prioritise is absolutely number one. And if this might come back, absolutely, it is right up there. It is just because I don't know. So for me, if we can get a little bit more information just to clarify that space, that would be awesome. Okay, if there are no more questions, I am going to move this paper. Thank you for the update. I really enjoyed reading this, reading the 4 categories and see what goes where. Because, you know, at the end of the day, you guys know all of our plans and stuff. It's not our daily bread, so it takes a lot. Like Rawinia said earlier, it's an intense agenda to read. So thank you for also humouring us and making sure we're all informed as can be. So I'll move this paper. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Foster, all in favour? Contrary? Yeah, it's just a noting. Thank you for that, team. Okay. Urban spatial layers, 137. Another noting report. Drew, are you going to guide us through that? Thank you.
Sure. Through the chair, in a way, this information paper is a continuation or perhaps more detail from the previous report. So it is largely an update of sort of progress. I thought it might be very useful, and I think from some of the Commissioner's comments of where in the process they came on board, good to look back a little bit in terms of the adoption of the FDS in March, and I guess current steps and next steps. One thing the paper wanted to sort of highlight was what the FDS signals we're attempting to achieve or enable via the plan, what the current plan, or how the current plan illustrates those spatial layers. Most importantly, for me, was what the national planning standards allows us to, so almost our intentions put through that lens of, there's been a lot of talk today on government guidance, so the standards government guidance. I have prepared just on the standards, if you indulge me, just one sentence. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding with the standards that it's purely just a template or a structure for us to sort of insert that content of the plan. But the government's summary, it's only one line at the time, was the standards are there to establish a common understanding, terminology and function for how the structure, which is the template that most people know it to be, maps, spatial layers and associated plan provisions apply. This is the important bit, not to dictate the rules that apply to them. So the government isn't forcing us rules down our council's throat. It's purely a kind of look and feel. Well, with that in mind, the paper sets out in spatial elements what that look and feel is and how subtly different some of them are. Most people are familiar with zones. I wanted to kind of table that it's part of the jigsaw or part of the rule, but you know, the spatial layers, there's more to a plan than zones.
Fair enough. Thank you for that, and I agree with what you say. As a council, we've worked with this before. Our two independent commissioners were not part of that process, so it's a good background for them as well. Okay, any questions or queries on our noting paper? Alan?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a bit of a geeky question for officers, and it's in relation to how you are going to approach mapping in the coastal area. And you don't have to answer it now, we can talk about it another day, but I'd be very interested to know how you're going to approach that layer, because it stumped me at Nelson. I was able to map every other layer, but when I got to the coastal area, I had real difficulty identifying different landscapes in the coastal environment, particularly in the marine area, differentiating between harbours and open coast and those sorts of things. So maybe at the next meeting, we can have an aside conversation. You can tell me the answer to it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Great. If I have no questions or queries of Prue, do I have a mover of this noting paper? Moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favour? 1-3 carried. Thank you, Prue. Okay, are we coming to our last paper? Why am I telling porkies? No, I'm not telling porkies. There we go. 158. Technical Reports Commission to inform regional policy statement and future regional and district plan provisions.
So with this paper, this was to give you, I guess, that background and that overview so you can get behind the curtain a little bit. So just take the report as read, and if you've got any particular questions about anything, we can answer those.
For those of you that don't know about the air sheets, that was a debate we had a while back where we take the city and then we took the city as its own air shed, and sometimes you might see something in the Gisborne Herald where council will have to say in winter the air quality is exceeding the limit. So that's where that comes from, the air shed stuff. But it was really interesting, and also to see the next step. Colin.
Actually, bang on that one. Page 161.14, and get it, but can you still build houses with fire? And if not, especially, you know, it's probably the cheapest form of heating in this region at the moment. Or have we shut all fires down because of
I don't know that off the top of my head, and I don't think anyone here will, but I can get back to you on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, just a question.
Yeah, I've got a question. Just relating to our airshed, and I know we exceed our in winter. Yeah, we exceed what we're supposed to be allowing for. But do we cater for dust You know, is that a pollutant? And in particular, pine dust. Because at this time of the year now, with these strong nor'westers, we've got a lot of dust from unsealed areas, particularly at port. That's kind of a problem there, and we water it down a bit, but on combination of that with, as we see on all our cars, pine dust. So is that monitored at all?
Probably by the Ministry of Health, I would say.
That's James' question.
James. James is like, what are you talking about? We're talking about pollen and dust.
Yeah, we do. Air quality covers anything that impacts air quality. So it is pollen, smoke, and dust particles as well, from my understanding. We do have a resident expert, Kate Sykes, who loves all things air quality related. We've got stations set up across the district, and we work closely with the Medical Officer of Health as well around air quality matters.
Just like I said, particularly this time of year, you kind of go to your car and it's like it's all covered in dust and pollen and everything. So we must be breathing it all in. So yeah.
Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. Really interesting to see the variety of technical work being commissioned, reflecting the lateness to which I've joined this process. I'm interested in how the work has been identified as needing to be done. Has this work been identified through conversations, through engagement, through iwi, hapu, commentary? Just interested in the background to the work being commissioned. And I've noted a couple of gaps in the cultural heritage space. Sites of significance absolutely need to be looked into, but reflecting my earlier comment about how this work's been identified, have iwi and hapu had the opportunity to comment on this work? Is there additional work around Mātauranga Māori region-wide, not just sites? And finally, demographics, so future population and economic development based on, for example, the future development strategy. Bit of background would help me understand how this work's been proposed.
I can answer the last one about demographics, and then I'll hand over to Paula for your other two questions. We've not noted that in this paper because that's a piece of work that our council approaches through the 3-year plan. We obviously had the housing and business capacity assessment process we went through as part of the future development strategy as well. So in terms of the demographics and the economic development steps, etc., we use the council's environmental scan, which was produced to form part of the 3-year plan, and then on top of that, we will use which data is available to us. I do know Yannick is doing an interesting piece of work in the forestry space around economics in terms of I guess, measuring that in a way that perhaps is a little bit different to what's traditionally available in the statistics. So, sorry, that's a very roundabout answer, but hopefully that answers your question. Read those.
Thank you.
Through Your Worship, with regards to your first question around background, these reports were identified through issues and options reports that were written probably a good couple of years ago now. And through those issues and options reports, it identified things that needed to be updated or reviewed. And with regards to your second question around sites of significance to iwi and hapu and their involvement, originally we had iwi technicians involved in that process. But that's something we are also since fallen away. So that's also something we are hoping to still undertake. I hope that's answered your questions.
Just to add to that as well, just so you're aware, in terms of also, in addition to the issues and options report, with the natural hazards, there was a stock take around our existing information and the quality of it in terms of being able to inform that plan making process. So with some of the natural hazards reports, that's reflective of that particular stock take on top of, I guess, the issues and options report as well. And we're really happy to share those with you because they came through, I guess, prior to, in the previous training with this program of work, I guess being quite a lengthy program of work.
That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Top high. No more questions or queries? Do I have a mover for this paper? Moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Alder. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you so much, team. I thought we covered a lot of ground today. Thank you to staff. Nadine, please also... Okay, I will close our public meeting and we'll take a 5-minute break and come back at 3 o'clock. I do want to thank everyone for their input today. So I move that we go into public excluded, seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour?